Welcome to the world of LearnX. We're going to step inside to best practice, and I'm joined by Angela from PetScribers. So PetScribers is pretty new, just like best practice. We were launching at the London Vet Show this year. So tell us all about it, Angela. What's the big idea? What's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the mission that you're on?
Yeah, so I'm Angela. I'm an equine vet by trade and the co-founder of PetScribers. And PetScribers is the UK's first pet prescription platform. And the idea is that we lower the barrier to written prescriptions for both vets and owners. So on the vet side, we've created smart prescription writing software that enables vets to create a digital prescription and send it securely to an owner dashboard, so they never get a prescription in their hand. And on the owner side, we've created price comparison software to allow owners to compare prices between VMD accredited retailers. So giving them transparency over where they're buying from, whether they're motivated by cost, speed, or retailer preference. So Emma, my co-founder, came to me with the idea in 2021, sort of doodled on the back of a napkin in a pub in Malmesbury. And I was like, hold that thought, I'm pregnant. So 2 years later, our other halves essentially said to us, either start doing something with it or stop talking about it. And so we did. So in 2023, when I finally started wireframing out exactly what we were going to want to build. And then we set about trying to find ourselves a developer because neither of us are technical. So we started searching for a developer that would build what we wanted. And so then once we had a developer, we had to work out how to pay for a developer. So essentially our other halves funded us initially while we bootstrapped, and then we closed our funding round in June. So there's been quite a lot going on this year for us. We finally launched our price comparison website in the summer, so that's live, and it's been really well received by pet owners. And then we at London Vet Show, you're quite right, that was our first London Vet Show, and we showcased our prescription writing software. So a busy year all around, really. But from mine and Emma's perspective, we came from it from a different angle, but as practicing vets, we kept on seeing more and more owners not being able to afford the medication that they needed, and we didn't necessarily have the time or the resource to handhold them through the process of purchasing safely online. And so we thought we'd build the software instead.
So there's a real need on both sides. We're going to get into the nuance and the complexity of where those things meet, but it sounds really exciting. It's always good to hear someone on a journey doing something new, trying to solve a problem. So do you still have the napkin? Is that what you did the wireframes on, or did you go a bit more technical than that?
I asked this the other day whether she still had the napkin, and she said she didn't think so. But what we do have is our first ever pitch deck, which is not much better than a napkin, really. And when we started trying to think about raising funds, and I think it's been quite important for us sort of to see how far we've come to keep hold of these really the original items that we came up with, because it's it's a good reminder of how far you've come, I think, in the process.
Absolutely. So tell us about the problems you faced and challenges in a bit more detail. So you're wanting to help clients look at prescriptions. You have to do a lot of hand holding. What are some of the frustrations that you've had as a vet, and some of the frustrations that clients will have as well when looking at these areas?
Yeah, so Em and I come at it from a slightly different angle. So from Em's perspective, she's a small animal vet. She had 15 minutes in a consult environment, and she'd have to meet the owner, meet the pet, come up with a diagnostic or treatment plan, and perhaps dispense medication. And at the end of that conversation, an owner might say, "Oh, can I have a written prescription, please?" And Em would say, "Hold that thought." And the processing time on the vet side would be about 24 to 48 hours. And then, she wouldn't necessarily have the time to say, how to purchase safely. Owners don't necessarily know what the VMD is. In fact, not a single owner that we that questioned could tell us who the VMD were or what they did. And so we didn't feel that we were able to provide them with the support that they needed. And from my perspective, I was an equine vet on a yard, so I didn't have a practice management system. I didn't have a laptop in the car. Now, some people do, but I didn't. And so if I wanted to write a written prescription, I'd have to call my receptionist, who would then create me a Word document. Then she would convert it into a PDF and wait for me to go into the office to sign it before she'd be able to send it off to an owner. And so it just didn't really work from either side. And what we know from owners is that 38% 38%, I think was a CMA statistic, quoted owners, only 38% of owners know that they can purchase online, and only 1 in 7 do so regularly. And that's mostly due to fear. They're worried about doing it. They're worried about what they are going to purchase won't be authentic. And that's quite well founded, because 1 in 10 owners have now purchased counterfeit medication online. I think the VMD said there'd been over 600 cases of medication being sold on social media that they'd stopped since April this year. Or they're confused by the process. They don't understand how to obtain a written prescription, how to use it online. It's a really sort of fragmented process. And owners are struggling. Everyone's struggling. It's much more, everything's much more expensive at the moment. And so the system doesn't seem to be working for anybody involved. And from a vet's perspective as well, prescription fraud is rising significantly. And so it's risen exponentially since we haven't had the figures for this year or last year, but it's been going up really, really rapidly. And so lots of vets are now sending prescriptions directly to pharmacies. But the CMA investigation, as you probably know, the CMA launched an investigation in 2023, and one of their concerns is that owners might be paying too much for medication and they face barriers when it comes to purchasing online. And now one of the remedies that they've suggested is that a vet will have to create a written prescription either in the consult environment or within 24 hours, which would make it very difficult for a vet then to email that over to a pharmacy of the owner's choice, because it would force them into making a very quick decision without much research. So there's an awful lot going on in the prescription medication space, and the idea of PetScribers, like I said, is to lower the barrier on both sides.
Where could this go wrong? I'm listening to this idea, and I'm not going to claim to be the world's leading expert in this field. I've been in the veterinary sector for just a year and a half now, so I'm on a very sharp learning curve as I understand all the ins and outs of exactly how everything works. But it does sound like this could be really helpful, but could it also be harmful for vet practices as well if the CMAs enforce vets to point people online? Are independent practices going to be losing the ability to sell medicines to their customers? And aren't most of the big companies who are selling things online actually owned by some of the corporate groups? Isn't this something that could potentially be quite sticky and difficult for the market?
Yes, that's a tricky one. So there are some large veterinary group owned pharmacies, but there are dozens of pharmacies available. Now, lots of these pharmacies compete really well on price, but they compete less well on SEO. And so it's really important to M&I that we're able to shine a light on all of the pharmacies, irrespective of their ownership structure. So that's one thing. I think that's been really blown up in the media, that all of the pharmacies are owned by large veterinary groups, and that's just not the case at all. And I think from a veterinary perspective, I think we're often, particularly in the small animal model, and less so in the farm and equine model, the sort of professional fees are subsidised by medication sales. Now, I think that medication sales do make up a large portion of practice revenue. But if you look at the time it takes to write a written prescription, and you can get that down from maybe 10 minutes to 2 minutes, then you can repurpose the time that you've saved in fee-winning activities. So Emma and I plotted that out quite carefully. Now, it doesn't completely remove the impact, but it does mitigate it quite significantly. And so by making the process far more efficient, then you can, like I said, you can repurpose that time elsewhere. And I think from my perspective, I think trust is a really important word within the veterinary sector. And I think at the moment there is a bit of mistrust between, particularly owners in the media. I think lots of people trust their own vets, but there's a lot of vet bashing in the media. It's really horrible to see and hear, because I genuinely believe that all vets on the ground want what's best for the pets in front of them. But if a vet said to me in a consult environment, do you know what, that'll be much more cost effective for you to get online, I'd trust that vet forever, and anything else they then said to me, I would be much more on board with. There wouldn't be any sort of doubt in my mind that they had my best interests at heart. And on the flip side, I think if I were to get something and I hadn't been made aware that I could perhaps source it more cost effectively online, and I were to find that I could, and that hadn't been mentioned to me, I don't think that would sit very well with me as a consumer. So I think transparency and trust are at the heart of everything we do, and they're really critical. And I think the CMA are trying their best to improve transparency in the industry.
It's a really interesting challenge that you're tackling. And I can definitely see from both sides there's huge benefits in having effective systems. And like you say, if people can do the work if the vets can do the work that only the vets can do, and things are more streamlined, it creates a better experience, better provision for people. So who will this serve in the first instance? Who are your kind of early adopters, Angela? Who's really getting on board with PetScribers at this stage?
Yeah, so we've had, we are initially B2C, so we have users already that are using the platform and enjoying the platform. We have a partnership with a wonderful charity called the NFRSA, which supports retired service animals with medication costs. So it works really well with what we do. We're now, after London Vet Show, we have 60 practices interested in testing the software when it's live. So we presented the alpha, so the very early version at London Vet Show, and now we will be beta testing in the beginning of next year. So that was I think LVS was really validating for us. I think we weren't really sure how it would be received, and like I've said to you before, Emma and I are vets. We are really pro vet, and we feel that vets should be charged appropriately for their time. They are highly qualified, highly skilled individuals, but we think that medication can be purchased more cost effectively online, and we'd like to support owners in doing so. But what we're not going to do is replace point of care sales. So my pet is sick, I need this now. We're not looking to do that. If an animal needs something urgently, they should have that there and then.
So I'm just blue sky thinking here. I know this isn't a kind of research and development call, but could there be a model through which a vet would recommend someone to a price comparison site? Like, it kind of sounds like PetScribers is filling that area of the market. And could there be a way that the vet then could have a commercial interest in that transaction through some kind of transparent model? I'm not the expert in this field. I don't know, what the CMAs would say about something like that. But I remember being in a practice and sat in reception, and the problem that you've alluded to and the problem you're trying to solve is the man at the desk talking to the receptionist was saying, "Oh, I could get this much cheaper online," and he was complaining at the receptionist about the price of the medicine. Now, the girl was taken aback a little by what he said, and I listened to her response. She said, well, we have lots of overheads as a practice, so we have to charge, for the medicine. And my heart sank a little bit, because I thought there was a much better response there, and it could have been, at the practice here, we provide an incredible, facility for the local community, for the pets in the area, in the region, and you choosing to purchase from us is helping us to provide this incredible facility. Otherwise, you'd have to travel 20, 30 miles to get somewhere of this kind of level. And it was an interesting conversation to overhear, because there was honesty on both sides, but perhaps they both missed a bit of the point here of purchasing from your local vet. I'm wondering if there's some kind of model that could be transparent, but also help people to actually support their local practices. Is that something you've, within the many thoughts or conversations, what's your take on my little bit of blue sky thinking there?
I think that purchasing medication can be likened to driving down the motorway and needing fuel. So you need a product, you need, in this case, fuel. With a vet, you need medication. You either make a decision to go to a service station, which provides you with exactly what you need when you need it, and it's convenient and it is safe, and you know that. So you can go to a service station, but and are aware that will cost you more, but you're paying for that convenience and that service. Or you can come off a junction before, you can drive down an A road, and you can probably purchase your fuel more cost effectively in a different garage. But it's knowing that choice is available, I think, is the thing that's missing currently. I think lots of people will still choose to get their medication from their veterinary practice because it's what they're comfortable with, it's what they're happy with, it's what they're familiar with. But there will be some with the choice that will choose to go off on the A road. And I think that's okay. But it's having that choice and transparency rather than just saying, this is what you have.
And the petrol stations have to advertise the price in very bright numbers before people come in.
It's a choice thing, and it's knowing that you've got choices. But I think currently lots of people don't know that there is a choice.
Fascinating. It's a really interesting topic, and It's a really interesting model that you're going for as vets, doing something quite different. The world is very much changing. Do you feel there's a lot of resistance to change in the world of veterinary, Angela? You know, I've been working in the sector for just a year and a half. You've been working as a vet for much longer. You've been working on PetScribers for some time now. What's your thought about expectations? What's your thought about change in the sector? Are people a bit scared about what might happen moving forward?
I think there's a lot of uncertainty around the outcome of the CMA. I think that's been quite uncertain for the last few years. And although they've, you've got your working group documents, working group papers, your provisional decision report and your proposed remedies, nobody really knows what the outcome will be. And so I think there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment, and a lot of people are looking for solutions that might help with the potential proposed remedies. I think there's two schools of thought. Some vets, just like anybody else, are very, very forward thinking, and some less so. I don't think I'd say that I'd like to generalize vets on the whole, but like I said, we were, I think from Emma and my perspective, because we are vets building something for vets, so the prescription writing software, we've tried to think about every possible eventuality in terms of what we want, what we need. So I don't know if you've ever written a written prescription, but it takes quite a lot of head work. It takes quite a lot of mental arithmetic, quite a lot of calculations. And depending on how comfortable you are writing a prescription for the medication that you're writing it for at the time, depends on how much head work that takes. So, if you're a highly experienced vet, then you might know exactly what the dose rate is, exactly how many tablets are in a pack or mils are in a pack. And it might be an easier set of an easier arithmetic for you to do. But for a more recent grad, you might have to look that dose rate up specifically, or if it's a medication you're not familiar with. And so Emma and I have tried to build the software with auto-populated doses, auto-populated pack sizes, auto-populated care labels to try and make writing a written prescription something that is genuinely possible whilst having a conversation in a consult environment, to try and remove that sort of mental load from already stretched veterinary teams. So I think where Em and I are unique is we're not sort of showcasing technology that we don't understand or wouldn't use. We are building something that we know really, really well and solving the problems that we've experienced ourselves. And so I think we were delighted when the vets that we showed at London Vet Show agreed that this is something that would be very helpful to them in practice. So I think when it's something that's helpful rather than just technology for technology's sake, vets are apparently very on board.
And what's your hope for the coming year then, in terms of getting vets on board, in terms of going direct to consumers? Like, how big is the vision for PetScribers?
Yeah, so this year so obviously this year just gone, we've gone from sort of a proof of concept last Christmas to having a fully functional price comparison website and our prescription writing software in testing, which is exactly where we wanted to be. So for next year, we really want to expand our pharmacy offering. So we have, I think, 8 pharmacies listed. We have 2 in advanced conversations, which is brilliant. So the broader the selection of pharmacies, we feel that the better the comparison is. The other thing that's been really exciting has been the interest from insurers, and insurers are looking to integrate the PetScribers software as part of their claims pathway. And that's been really, really interesting. And then obviously the prescription writing software, we've had significant interest from practice management systems looking to, again, integrate the software to try and help busy vets with reduced time.
Integration seems like a really important thing, because I think a lot of teams are scared of more technology equals tech tangles and everything, getting more and more complex. There's lots of new technology on the market, but this seems to be solving quite a narrow and quite a specific problem, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. It doesn't feel very narrow when you're staring down the barrel of a fully prescribing platform. But yes, it is a very specific pinpoint. We're not trying to, create a practice management system, but it does solve a lot of problems for a lot of people. So when we spoke to vets at London Vet Show, they were very concerned about prescription fraud, and more of the vets had experienced prescription fraud to varying degrees. So whether it was owners taking a prescription and then using it in multiple pharmacies, or whether we had one vet tell us that they'd had someone fraudulently create a prescription using their name and RCVS number, which is really concerning. And so the big draw, I think, of what we're creating is that an owner will never get a physical prescription in their hand. The vet will create it on the prescription writing software. It will be sent securely to an owner dashboard. The owner can then choose the pharmacy of their choice from our partner pharmacies, and then send that prescription directly to them. And then we will populate a database whereby each prescription has a unique identifier, and so that prescription can't be used again. And so the idea of it being used repeatedly is no longer a problem in our share of the market. So I think it solves a lot of problems for a lot of people. But you're right, people don't like the idea of having multiple items of standalone tech. And so integration is full integration or white labeling is something that will be a big part of our journey this year. And then, yeah, like I said, the insurance companies are very, very, very interested in helping owners have free choice.
Amazing. So it's great to hear about the model, and you're doing something new. So hats off to you for finding a problem, tackling it. I'm sure, like with any tech platform, what you're doing now will evolve and change. There'll be features and functions that you've worked hard on that you throw in the bin, and there'll be other things that you thought were an afterthought that end up being, really key features. That's the exciting part of starting a technology company is the learning and adapting as things go on. So let's change focus a little bit, Angela, in terms of the need for innovation in the veterinary sector, and particularly within the UK veterinary sector. What advice would you give to anyone who has an idea to solve a unique problem that could be perhaps solved with technology? You've obviously been on this journey, and it's great to see how you've gone from idea to launch, and there could be a very, very exciting future for PetScribers. But what would you say to someone who's perhaps scribbling down things on the napkin at this stage?
Yeah, I think probably don't be overwhelmed by the problem that you're trying to solve. I think for Em and I, a really pivotal moment this year was we responded to the CMA review, and that was, we just didn't think we were advised that we should do. We responded to it, and off the back of that, we had a meeting with the CMA. And realizing that actually in that kind of environment, they're generalists and we are subject matter experts in terms of the prescribing process, and they were genuinely interested in what we had to say. And so don't be overwhelmed by the problem that you're trying to tackle. Em and I are tackling a problem that affects over half of UK households, but it's something that it's your wheelhouse. It's something that you're really, really comfortable in. And I think, if you're not really physically repulsed by your first pitch deck, then you're probably not trying hard enough to get away from it. I think that's probably a fair assessment of our first pitch deck. It's absolutely awful, but keep it because it will remind you of how far you've come.
How bad was it? I mean, how bad was it? Come on, Angela,
Yeah, it's pretty.
Please do.
It was pretty awful. Yeah, I'll send you a copy for some bedtime reading. I can send you the evolution of our pitch deck. It's really quite funny. And at the time, you're like, this is great.
And how did you get help with that from going to, maybe an idea that had some very rough edges, and maybe sometimes people have big ideas, but they're a bit fluffy, and then you share it with someone and they bring you down to earth a little bit with some questions. What was that journey like in terms of iterating your idea?
Yeah, I think Em and I have always been hyper focused on the problem we were trying to solve and how we'd go about it. I think what we probably didn't realize is how, although it's a very niche and very pinpointed item, how big the platform is to build. It's absolutely enormous. And I think we got a lot of external help, but the idea hasn't actually changed that much since its inception. But what has changed is the order that we've done things, since you've got to be quite responsive in a startup to the market needs. And so that's shuffled around a little bit. But we joined a lot of accelerators. We got lots of external help from people that had done this before. I did something called Female Founders. We were a member of Accelerate Her. And you learn from talking to other people within your cohort. The other thing that was really transformative for me was I did a LinkedIn branding course through Female Founders Rise, and essentially I was a bit of a LinkedIn lurker, and I'd never really got into the whole posting on LinkedIn regularly. But I went from a lurker to a LinkedIn lover, and I now post really regularly. And I would say a significant portion, over half of our sort of commercial relationships, have come off the back of LinkedIn contacts. which is ridiculous when I say it out loud. But I think LinkedIn, learning that professionalism and personality don't have to be mutually exclusive. So being unapologetically yourself, but still a thought leader within your space, for me was, fairly freeing, I think, because I was always worried. They used to say that today's newspaper is tomorrow's chip paper. And I think the same thing's true of LinkedIn. If you write something that you're not, you don't like or doesn't get much attention, that doesn't matter. It'll just be buried by the algorithm. And that kind of attitude towards LinkedIn posting has been, transformative for Em and I. And the other thing, I couldn't do this without. So we always joke that Em's my work wife, and she's the first person I speak to in the morning and probably the last person I speak to at night most days. And having somebody to bounce those ideas off, or your best every day is very, very different. Some days your best is like extra, and some days your best is like barely surfacing. And on the days where you're not doing so well, or you're not feeling so chipper, then having a co-founder to pick you up or take the slack is priceless, I would say.
You have name dropped her a lot in the conversation, Angela. You have mentioned many times here. So what's the relationship like there in terms of, where are your strengths? Where are her strengths? What makes a good team? Like if people are looking for a co-founder for a new idea, or even someone maybe in the practice to drive new ideas forward, what makes a good kind of collaboration in your experience?
Yeah, so Em and I we're so different in lots of ways, but we're very well aligned in our vision for PetScribers. And I think that's really, really key for us. So essentially, Emma had a different route to veterinary practice than me. So she qualified from Cambridge in natural sciences. Then she had a hiatus as an investment banker during a really great year for investment banking. So she was made redundant in 2008. She then decided that she wanted to earn less money and work longer hours, and took her redundancy and put herself through vet school. So Em is absolutely ninja with a spreadsheet. She is, she's really great with a spreadsheet. So that I'd say is her strength. Em sits much more within the product side of the business now. So she deals quite closely with the tech team, and she ensures that our tech is delivered in a timely manner. She troubleshoots it with them. She's very much product focused, whereas I do much more of our commercial relationships. I deal with our contracts. I deal with our commercials, our communication, and things like this. I'm very happy to chat to somebody on a screen for 40 minutes, whereas I can bet my right foot will be knee deep in a database right now. So we both have our strengths, but we're both very different, but we both have as a shared vision for what we're trying to build, how we're going to get there. We have a really lovely working relationship.
That's great. It's great to hear. You mentioned a few things. I'm not going to be able to remember the names of them, like accelerators and the different cohorts and groups. I'm going to take a guess here. They're not. They weren't veterinary specific, were they? Or were some of them veterinary specific? So you've had to look outside of the sector to find the kind of entrepreneurial input, perhaps. So tell us a bit about that. Are they national organizations, initiatives, or did you find local, regional things? And what support was there within the veterinary community for innovation?
Yeah, so I'd say within the veterinary community, we met other lovely co-founders who were really supportive. Locally, we discovered our local growth hub, and that's been really incredible for us. They provided us with mentors within the tech space. We also did an accelerator through them, and we won one of their awards. One of our charity partners came via the growth hub, but the others are national, and that was through research, really, and researching women in innovation and those kind of things. But the Female Founders Rise group has been incredible. I think it's 50,000 women strong now. And the support that I gained through that was just incredible. And the same with Accelerate Her, a Scottish accelerator, and they're a sort of arm of Investing Women Angels. And they actually invested in us as well. So just doing a little bit of research. We haven't paid for any accelerators. They've all been virtual and really kindly supported by other commercial contracts and communities. But they pretty transformative for us in terms of your thinking and the way you approach a problem and the pitch deck. For one, there were part of the accelerator was basically tearing your pitch deck to shreds and then putting it back together. And that, again, I think was really, really beneficial for Em and I, having seen the state of the first one. But yeah, it was a lot of research. But I think it's important to remember that nobody knows what they're doing when they first start. And being on that journey with other people, particularly the posting on LinkedIn, it was great to know that there were other people doing it for the for the first time at the same time as me, so you didn't feel like such an idiot. But yeah, I think community is king, and I think if you find your people, then you're winning.
I think it's quite clear that the world of veterinary practice is going to change. I'm not going to, be heralded as a genius for making that suggestion. I think lots of people know that. It's quite clear. Practices are going to have to look at their business models. This is something that some people will be very reluctant to do because it's been one way for a long time. It's worked, but things are changing. Technology's changing. The CMAs will change things in one way or two ways or three ways or many more ways. What kind of advice would you give to a practice owner who is perhaps dragging their heels a little bit when it comes to innovation and change? What are the kind of things that you learned through the accelerators, through getting a new idea off the ground, that you think would actually give a practice owner or someone starting a new practice the kind of resilience, the kind of creativity that's needed to thrive in the future?
I think just because that's the way it's always been, it's not the way it always has to be. And I think looking outside the sector for ideas and inspiration is really important. I think I qualified in 2009 and I was in vet practice, but looking outside of the veterinary profession and seeing how people do things elsewhere, and extrapolating that into the world that we live in, I think is really important. I think as vets, we can become very vet centric, but thinking outside the box, like you said earlier, sort of blue sky thinking and trying to reimagine things are done is beneficial, whatever sector you're in. I think, I think a lot of the CMA recommendations and provisional decisions, a lot of good practices already do in terms of providing estimates and itemized bills. I think lots of practices are already doing that. I think the sort of overhaul of the Veterinary Surgeons Act is long overdue and will give people a lot more comfort when veterinary practices are held accountable as well as just vets, so non-veterinary personnel. And empowering vet nurses as well, I think, is a really important part of the changing the Veterinary Surgeons Act. So there's a lot of good things to come out of the CMA. I know there's lots of things that are making practice owners quite nervous, and I can completely understand that.
So as we come into land, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you feel is really important to get across to anyone who's listening? We've got people who'll be listening who may be practice owners, vets, vet nurses, people in the administrative and reception teams. Is there anything you want to get across that we might not have talked about so far?
I think maybe embracing change, trying to be open-minded about change rather than worried about what might happen. The CMA is a bit of an unknown at the moment, and I know that's something that people are cautious about and concerned about. But I think trying to be open-minded, I think a system where honesty, clarity, and empathy are central always wins. I think trust and transparency is always king. And I think I would like owners to feel informed. Like I said, driving down the motorway, you've got a choice, you know that choice, you understand it. And I think that's the same. I think that gentleman at reception that you spoke about earlier, he didn't realize there was another choice until he'd already purchased something. And so I think understanding your choices gives people the opportunity to make the best choice for them. And I don't think there's one size fits all. I don't think every person will choose to purchase online, but I think being armed with the right information to make the best choice for them is really important. And then the other thing that's really important is to ensure that the pets get access to the medication they need. I think from that perspective, that making it more affordable for owners that couldn't necessarily afford it in a consult environment isn't the wrong thing to do.
Great. Well, it's so good to speak, Angela. Really nice to connect, to learn more about what you're doing to solve a challenging problem, a complex problem, because it's more than a one-sided problem. So hats off to you for your innovation, for what you're doing, for your desire as a vet to continue serving the veterinary community, and also to look at what pet owners need and what the pets ultimately need as well. I look forward to seeing how things progress with PetScribers and speaking again at some point soon. Thank you so much for joining. And for all of you who are watching and listening, make sure you head on over to the LearnX platform. There's more information there about PetScribers. And if you're wanting to get your CPD certificate, make sure you post a comment on the reflection questions for this session. Thanks so much for joining. We'll see you on the inside.